thank you, Kun Gawi, for that introduction, especially since it's short and you didn't reveal any more secrets. It's a great pleasure for me to be here, especially to speak about the ASEAN socio-cultural community. As somebody who had the honor of chairing ASEAN during a very important time, just after we got the new charter and was heading towards the establishment of the ASEAN community, which will be realized by the end of this year. I am somebody who cares passionately about the need for the ASEAN peoples to stick together, to move forward together in one single community. And when I was approached by ERIA, by Kun Gawi, and was asked to speak on the ASCC, I immediately accepted. Of course, with the condition that the military would let me out of the country. Now my worry is getting back in, which I will do this evening. The reason why I quickly accepted, because for me, a true community is a community of people. And while all the three pillars that support the ASEAN community are important, in the end, whether we do have a community is if we actually share some values or identity, which was widely discussed this morning. And just to reflect upon the difficulty of this task, despite the progress that we have made, I was just interested to test the reaction of people. I get invited to give many talks, to many meetings. Whenever I tell somebody, oh, I will be speaking on ASEAN, they will say, oh, okay. When I get asked to speak on the AEC, people get very excited. So yesterday, when I was asked, what am I going to do in KL today? And I said, I'm speaking on the ASCC. The reaction was, what? That's the enormity of the challenge. Despite the community being established at the end of this year, for people in Thailand, and I'm sure for many other ASEAN countries, all the focus is on the economy. All the focus is on the economic community. And there is so little talk or little awareness of the work on the political security front and also on the socio-cultural front. But for me, as I said, this should be the heart of the community. It's about bringing people together. It's about instilling that sense among our peoples that we have a shared destiny. That our destinies are bounded together and that we must move ahead to ensure peace in the region and prosperity and a good life for all ASEAN peoples. Now, how are we going to go about achieving this socio-cultural community or making it a strong pillar that supports the ASEAN community? For me, we have to ask questions first about the future. I was commenting this morning that perhaps we don't talk enough about the future. We worry about finding an identity based on our past, based on our histories. But what's going to move us all together forward is if we concentrate on our aspirations. What do we want the ASEAN community to be? What do we want the ASEAN community to serve us? Which objectives and what kind of society or what kind of community do we want to be and be seen by the rest of the world? And for me, the evolution of ASEAN over the last almost 50 years now has always responded to the challenges of the time. When ASEAN was founded, the focus was on security matters. It was to ensure that the conflicts and the fighting did not interrupt the development progress of the region. We were successful. After the conflicts and the fighting had ended, we managed to bring all the 10 Southeast Asian countries into the organization. Then, of course, when economic competition became the main challenge for all our countries, we responded with the initiative of the Free Trade Area. And of course, subsequently, now we are aiming to have an economic community, one single market, one production base. But the fact of the matter is, for ASEAN people to have what their deserved place in the global community, we have to have a voice in the global community. Not just economic bargaining power, but also a contribution, a role where we can play as a region that contributes to global peace and responding to other global challenges. That's where we want to be. That's where we have to be if we are going to survive in this day and age. Because we all recognize with China to the north, India to the west, standing alone as small, medium-sized countries, economies, we will not have the voice or the place in the global community that we deserve. So that should be the guiding thought as to how we move ahead with building a community and a socio-cultural community. And for me, the focus on the economy is actually misplaced. Why? Even with so much excitement about what the AEC is going to bring, already the AEC is probably going to be superseded by the TPP, by a free trade agreement between the United States and the European Union. And in any case, we should now be thinking about ASEAN as a way to respond to the mega deals that are happening in the world. So the economy can only be part of the story. And what's more, a lot of us don't even recognize that the free trade area has been in place, the tariffs have been reduced, 99-something% of all the goods that have been agreed upon. But did you know that the take-up rate is actually quite low? So there are lots of businesses, for instance, in Thailand, who are eligible for their rights according to the free trade, after the ASEAN free trade area, but they don't even bother to actually apply, to actually go through and take up the privileges or the rights accorded to them. That's suggesting that we still lack a sense of community. We lack a sense of awareness that our government agencies are not putting enough priority on being part of ASEAN to get people engaged, to get people involved, even in areas that they deeply care about, like the economy. And I'll give you one more reason why I don't think focusing on the economy is the answer. Look at the European Union. What's keeping the European Union together and what might tear it apart? When I was chair of ASEAN, I used to get critical questions from journalists. Why are you so unambitious? Why aren't you aiming for a common currency? And I used to tell them, with great difficulty in convincing them, that the conditions about fiscal, monetary policies, governance had to be right to get a common currency working. I don't know if they believe me, but a few years on, they don't ask that question anymore. Because they see what happened in the European Union. The common currency is even too difficult for European countries that have tried to integrate over the last 4 or 5 decades. So it's not exactly the economy or the economic agreement that's keeping the European Union together. Greece, Portugal, Spain, Ireland all have difficulties. But one of the things that people don't often talk about with the European crisis is you should really be impressed that despite the scale of the crisis, the European countries are actually very determined to stay together in the European Union. Why do the Greeks, the Spanish, the Irish, why are they prepared to suffer a huge austerity program just to stay in the European Union? Why are the taxpayers in Germany, in France, in a number of other countries prepared to pay taxes to prop up banks in Greece, in Spain, in Portugal? I asked this question to my European colleagues. And the answer wasn't economic power or competitiveness. The answer for them was the union means much more to them than the economy. The union for them is the best guarantee of peace. The union for them allows the Europeans to express themselves that they have unique values. They talk about human rights, they talk about sustainable development, and it's these principles that now guide the European governments when they deal with crises like migration, refugees, the environment, and so on. So what makes a union or a community is more about values and identity. And that's why for me, I was so pleased to just catch up the last session where all the distinguished speakers put emphasis on the need to have this identity. And that can only come through a process of trust building and creating this sense of belonging. I know there are numerous suggestions, perhaps too many of them in the framework that you have in front of you, but there are things that will clearly help. The emphasis on education, particularly about the region's history, that's part of it. The use of the creative arts to bring people together, to somehow create even a new identity or culture for the whole region. But I go back to the message I started with. We also need to look forward. And if we want to be a true community, we must begin to think about what kind of community we want to be. What is it that will play well with our cultures, with our history? And I stumbled upon one word that we will be very familiar with. The ASEAN way. This word has had positive and negative connotations. Sometimes it's difficult to pinpoint exactly what the ASEAN way is, but it's clearly there. And for me, it suggests that if we probe a bit deeper as to what makes the ASEAN way, can we adapt, can we build on that, and create the ASEAN values and the ASEAN identity? In my earlier days as a Member of Parliament, I was very critical of the ASEAN way. I thought ASEAN was too unambitious. We were far too reluctant to tackle issues that really matter to all of us. But through time, I think the ASEAN way has adapted. I was interested this morning, a member of the panel mentioned the word flexible engagement. If I recall correctly, Dr. Surin Pitsuwan was the first to use the word and got criticized roundly by almost the rest of ASEAN. But the funny thing was, the rejection of his use of the word was followed by the practice of flexible engagement, although we never officially recognized it. I might disagree with one of the distinguished panelists who spoke about this principle of non-intervention. Well, yes, we say there's non-interference. But one concrete example where I think ASEAN has made a vital contribution, Myanmar. If ASEAN had followed the Western way and forgets that the Western world had the luxury of distance and decided to alienate Myanmar, I don't think we would have seen the elections last week. We engaged. But we engaged in an ASEAN way. The rest of the world thought we didn't care about Myanmar. It's not true. At all the ASEAN summit, there would be a discussion about Myanmar. We just don't make public statements about them, because we know that in this region, face matters and respect is important. And if you recall, when Cyclone Nargis hit Myanmar, the rest of the world couldn't get in to provide assistance. It was only because ASEAN had built that trust, that engagement, that we were the bridge for the rest of the world to provide relief and assistance to Myanmar. This is what we have to build on to create, if you like, the ASEAN identity or set of values to take this community forward. So what would that mean in practical terms? How about, first of all, saying that as far as our economic integration is concerned, it's not just about one production base, one single market. We will be a carrier economy. I read in this book a big shopping list, Millennium Development Goals Plus, on education, on health, on the standard of living of women, children, and disabled. Well, ASEAN should say that we stand for a caring economy. No one's going to get left behind. We deeply care about distribution, not just growth, not just competitiveness, because it's in our nature. Didn't someone say this morning that 2 of ASEAN countries lead the table on giving? Well, let's make that an ASEAN thing. Let's make this a Southeast Asian thing, that we stand for a caring economy. So that when you go through your list and try to achieve these goals, you have this one guiding principle, something that captures the imagination of all ASEAN people and say, we care about our neighbors, we care about all Southeast Asian people, and we will implement and we will try to hit these targets. So that would involve maybe setting a minimum standard of living for everybody. We can't be too ambitious, we have to recognize our economic limitations, but it will send a clear signal that will be a region that will not marginalize people in this very fast changing and fast growing global economy. And we should be demanding fairness. Perhaps we should, as a region, lead on some issues concerning distribution on a global scale. And say we want to demand, for instance, that the financial sector has to give back to the real sector. As a group, we can take a common stand. That's, I think, would set us apart from other regions and begin to show the world that we have something to contribute. Secondly, we have to share global concerns. We can't turn a blind eye to the issue of the environment. We can't turn a blind eye to the issue of sustainability, and of course on rights that were mentioned this morning. How can we be a community if together we don't have a joint plan to tackle the issue at Haze? That happens every year. How can we be a community without an implementation of anything in the name of ASEAN when this problem happens year by year? And you can't put the blame on Indonesia. How many ASEAN multinationals, companies, corporations are contributing to the haze? And yet we are all silent about how we should tackle or prevent the haze. How can we be a community if when faced with a problem like the Rohingyas, we are just looking around and say, well, you deal with this, and not saying we will all deal with this. So a number of global concerns: trafficking, the environment, sustainability, and to a certain extent right, and I will tackle that later. These have to be at the forefront of what we stand for and care about. So, caring economy, and that we are a community that share global concerns and will play our part. And now coming back to the issue of rights, to the issue of political issues, if you like. I know you may say, well, that's the job of the other pillar, the political security community, although I'm not so sure what they are doing about these issues either. We should be more transparent about what we want to do in terms of standards of political engagement. This morning it's mentioned that there are things that are missing out. Political rights, rights of journalists, presence of civil society. Well, it hasn't always been like this. During Thailand's chairmanship, we did two things. We pushed and got a compromise on the Human Rights Commission, the Intergovernmental Human Rights Commission, and we actually set a precedent, or tried to set a precedent, that at ASEAN summit meetings, we have to engage parliamentarians, youth, and civil society. That they must have representatives that can actually speak to the leaders. And we provided that for them. Unfortunately, at the time, one ASEAN leader, who shall remain nameless, was very upset about the representatives from his country and demanded that he chose who represented the civil society from his country. And his complaint, I think, was loud enough so that subsequent chairs were reluctant to hold the forum. I was thinking to myself, well, I've heard all over the world of people electing governments. This is the first time governments are actually electing its people. But we have to move forward. We can't bring everybody along immediately, but we have to continue to set the tone. And the way we do it, yes, it's back to the ASEAN way. If we can't do it through public statements, condemnation, demands, we'll do it the ASEAN way. But make sure it remains on the agenda. And maybe gradually build on this. Well, if you're not happy with the format that civil society is coming in and perhaps bringing up sensitive issues, can we start with a forum for them, a way in which they can voice their concerns, and a way in which leaders at least respond or address those concerns. That's what we should also aim for. You will see that what I'm saying is not entirely different from, was it 300 and something things that you're doing? But it has to be presented in a different way. This isn't about 300 projects and making sure that the minimum standard of education in Laos or in Myanmar or in Thailand or in the Philippines should be so and so. This should be about what kind of education do you want the children of Southeast Asia to have? And it's not just about setting the goals. You have to also answer the question, well, if the goals aren't reached, what is ASEAN doing about it? What is ASEAN doing about it? Not what is the Lao government or the Thai government or the Singaporean government is doing about it. If we just write a list and say, well, all the countries have to reach this standard, but ASEAN itself does not provide a mechanism to help, how is that a community? That's just you setting the rules for individual nations to follow. It doesn't create a community. So we have to have some mechanisms as well to make sure that these are achieved under clear guiding principles. The final message I would give to you before I open the floor to questions and discussions is this. political leadership is important. I don't want to classify this as top-down, and I recognize and agree that there has to be many bottom-up initiatives. But political leadership is important. If ASEAN were left to just bottom-up initiatives, we wouldn't be where we are today. It took some visionary leadership from our predecessors who recognized security problems, economic challenges, that they made ASEAN evolve to respond to the challenges of the day. Well, we're facing one now. And we think that to overcome global challenges today, we have to stick together as a community. The politicians must provide leadership. With due respect to all bureaucrats, bureaucratic initiatives are not enough. When you see the face of the European Union, who do you see as guiding the Union along, reflecting the values of the Europeans? You see the German Chancellor, sometimes you might see the French President. But when you see the European Union bureaucracy, people are turned off. I remember when I used to get asked, what does the European Union, what lessons do I draw from the European Union? Does ASEAN wish to be like the European Union? I used to answer, we'd like to be like the European Union minus the bureaucracy. That's what we have to do. And so it's important for leaders to take the initiative, to set out this vision, to give us a guide, and then we will create, the people will then create the identity, the values that we look for. We don't have to consciously say it's got to have to be rooted in Southeast Asian history. Our nature will make sure that the values we create reflect who we are and where we come from. So I would urge all of you to encourage your respective governments, your political leaders, that they have to play their part. I know all of them have a lot on their hands, lots of domestic political problems or economic challenges. But the fact of the matter is, if we truly believe that the region can only move ahead by being stronger together and united, we have to help contribute to create this community. And we're not creating a community that is closed off to the world. Part of the values that we've shared in this region is that we've always been a very open region. So we have to prove that not only are we getting together and sticking together and moving ahead together to make ourselves stronger, we think we have a place in the world, that we want to contribute, that we are good citizens of the global community. Only then will we realize what we are all here gathered here to do, which is to create a vital pillar for a true community. So I urge you all to help think and act to make sure that our political leaders and our governments are encouraging people and interacting with people to create this community. Thank you.
Thank you very much.